Testing. Testing. All right, if everyone can come in and have a seat, please. We're going to get started. All right, good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing today? All right, good. This is so funny having these microphones like this. I feel like Sally Jesse Raphael. I'm dating myself a little bit, but it's good to be here in Atlanta. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Michael Allen, and I am the president and CEO of a training and consulting business that's based in Baltimore, Maryland, called Mascan Enterprises, LLC. And this is my second time here in Atlanta. This is my first NASW conference in the state of Georgia, and I'm pleased to be here. Next week I'll be in Pennsylvania, so it is indeed a pleasure to see you all. You guys are so gracious, as you can probably tell from my accent that I hail from Brooklyn, New York. So please, all right. So please don't hold it against me if you're not a fan of the North. What we're going to talk about today is rather serious. It's psychological first aid, and I mean, if you have a television screen or a radio, you know the impact of psychological first aid and so much disasters that are going on within our country at this time. And you know, we're on heightened awareness. And you know, I live in Baltimore, Maryland, just a couple of exits away from Washington, D.C. And my friends joke with me. They said, "Well, you're leaving the area for a while to try to get away from all of the mischief that's going on out there." And it's some really sad and really just rough times within just for us as a nation, but also just with mental health. And today I wanted to talk about how that plays a role, but most importantly, how can we take care of the clients that we service, take care of our families, and most importantly, take care of ourselves. As social workers, we are great with taking care of everybody else except who? Absolutely, we know it, but yet we still continue to do that, right? Just tell you a little bit about myself. In addition, as it relates to psychological first aid, I worked for a couple years ago, about 7 years ago, I was the lead social worker with the University of Maryland Shock Trauma Center. I worked within a research program called the Violence Intervention Program. And with that, I worked directly with patients that were intentionally injured due to acts of violence. Most of it was drug-related, just some disputes that they could have resolved if they had the ability to communicate effectively with one another. And I'm also trained in critical incident and stress debriefings as well, so I am CISD trained to work with individuals and groups. About 3 years ago, I started my training company because I'm a Mako social worker, and I felt that, you know, versus working with one individual, that I can do more of a service by working with masses as well. I'll be remiss if I didn't share with you guys that an apology that I've only given out 30 pamphlets, 30 slides, okay? So they informed me that it was only going to be a total of 30 individuals here, so I do apologize about that, but I have a slew of business cards here, so if you would like me to email you that presentation, I certainly will do that, okay? I can do that by the end of the week, and I'll be in town for the next couple of days. So, what is psychological first aid? Psychological first aid is an approach to assist children, adults, families, and organizations in immediate aftermaths of disasters and terrorism as well. Psychological first aid is really designed to reduce that initial distress that folks feel when they are exposed to some sort of trauma, terrorism, disasters, and so forth. But it also helps the survivor to get back to just quote unquote a normal lifestyle, or as close to normal as they possibly can, okay? The basic objectives of psychological first aid is to connect the survivors as soon as possible with social supports. I mean, regardless on if you have experienced any trauma at all or not, we all need some supports. And as social workers, we definitely need to be supported because as we all said earlier, we said in unison that we're great with taking care of everybody else, with the exception of taking care of ourselves. But that holds true, okay? It's like, who do social workers go to when we need help? Okay, so just really identifying who that is. So survivors need to know how strong they are. They need to know how resilient they are, because if they were able to survive a traumatic or distressful incident, just surviving that alone shows how strong they are and how much resiliency that they have as well. Can somebody in the back, could you close that door, please? I'm just hearing some feedback. Thank you. So some other basics to objectives to psychological first aid is to help the survivors by providing them with some immediate resources, okay? So letting them know, what mental health provider is available within their area that they can go to for long-term treatment if they're really in distress, what shelters are available, any financial resources, food pantries, things of that nature. So that's some of the acute types of things that you definitely want to do. And psychological first aid is an acute type of service. So we're not going to have a ton of time to work with these individuals. So we're going to go with, we're going to meet them with a playbook, okay? We're going to have just a list of resources based off of the specific needs that they have so that we can get them connected as soon as possible. So we have to really maximize on a short amount of time that we have with the individuals. Okay, some strengths of psychological first aid. Again, it provides that acute services, assessment and referrals is essential. So you're constantly doing assessments and referrals, especially when it's trauma on a large basis. You want to be able to help as many people as you possibly can. The individual providing psychological first aid, or PFA, should know as much details of the event as possible. You want to gather as much information as you possibly can before you get on site to triage the situation. And the provider needs to use the appropriate interventions, okay? So utilizing interventions that are developmentally appropriate for individuals. Also working with adults that may be developmentally challenged, may have some issues with arrested development. Just knowing how to differentiate and decipher from those individuals respectively and how to engage them with the services that you are offering as well. So most people have never experienced trauma at all. Okay, most people have never experienced trauma at all. Like I said earlier, I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I got some cheers, but living in Brooklyn, New York, that was a part of my culture, being exposed to trauma on a regular basis. And I was doing a training in Southern Maryland a couple of months ago, and I was trying to make a point to my group of 30 clinicians, and I asked folks to raise their hand if they've ever been robbed, and all I heard was crickets. Right? I had normalized something like being robbed, and then that had made sense to me, but the rest of the group, they never had those experiences at all, and they could not connect with me at all. But it showed me that, I was able to normalize those types of situations. Although I have been so far removed from over 20 years, it still was a part of who the person I am, okay? Communication, education is important as it pertains to recovery. So like I said, most people have never experienced trauma before. I used to work as a federal contractor in Bethesda, Maryland, and something that happens on a regular basis while I would take the Red Line Metro train to work every day was when they started doing some budget cuts and laying people off, a lot of those individuals were jumping in front of that train because they could not realize their life without having this 6-digit figure job. Okay, they couldn't see themselves not providing for their families, so they said to themselves, I might as well be dead. Okay, so that level of resiliency to say, okay, I'm going to struggle, but as far as I'm low, I can reach that much higher to help myself and to help my family, and to know the different opportunities that are available there, and having that support, having individuals to talk to and share those experiences and those feelings with is really essential. So psychological support teams, okay, mental health preparedness and aid has tended to be reactive and unorganized rather than pre-planned and responsive. So we have to be proactive as clinicians. When I worked at that federal agency as a contractor, one of the things that I learned was when I came in every morning, we had to sign our names in. So initially I said, man, I have to sign in. You know, I'm 40 years old. Why do I have to sign my name in? And I spoke to another long-term employee who was there, and he says, well, Mike, that is so that if there is an emergency, we'll know who signed in the morning time. So if we have, you know, a part of our contingency plan is to cross the street and we huddle up our unit, we go right underneath the bridge, underneath the pathway, and I'm the designated person, right? So I go, that person was designated to go through that sign-in sheet to see who was there, because if you weren't there, then that was a problem. Okay, we would do that, obviously, through some fire drills and things of that nature, just to see how it worked and see how many folks took that seriously. Because I think about 3 or 4 years ago, folks weren't really, 9/11 happened, folks were definitely on edge. But after 9/11, we sort of got comfortable. But nowadays, it's like you just never know when the next disaster is going to take place. Okay, regionally, disasters and terrorism happens regionally, so we have to plan regionally. So, for example, in California, in the state of California, there's often fires on a regular basis. So, do you think that those firefighters within the state of California are in communications with each other? Absolutely yes. Okay, so they have a contingency plan that, if X amount of firefighters are going in to triage the situation, put out a forest fire, put out whatever types of fire, that they're going to come in and they're going to assist as well, and have those man hours as well. So mental health resources need to be available to first responders, crisis workers, as well as the survivors. But as clinicians, we definitely have to take care of ourselves and be able to take care of one another, because while we're out triaging the situations, like what is set up, like what type of system is set up to triage our issues. Because when I worked in shock trauma for 4 years, I've seen a lot of horrific things that, I'll just let your mind imagine the things that I saw on a regular basis. And it was just pretty much a part of the job. Right? It was a part of the job, and I reached my threshold when it was just too much for me and I just had to leave. I did enough and I did as much as I possibly could, but I had to be cognizant and really know myself. So in order to help somebody else, you have to genuinely know yourself and know who you are, know when it's time to just tag out and say, look, I can't do that anymore. It doesn't make you weak. Right? It doesn't mean that you are not built to do the job. And I think that that's one of the beauties about social work, is that we are resilient, but we also can change populations that we work with, right? That is really awesome. So if we find out, initially, I got introduced to working at shock trauma as an intern, and that was really rewarding. It was a lot of press on our program. We were making change. We were implementing an evidence-based program. We were actually helping the individuals that we served, but just seeing the families and seeing individuals that were shot with AK-47s that would never have the ability to walk again or play sports again, it had an effect on me. And I just knew for myself, just knowing myself, that it was time for me to change populations that I work with. So who delivers psychological first aid? And this is just 6 right here, but it's multiple. It's oodles of individuals. But some of the first tier, first line people are the first responders, community members, primary and emergency health care, school crisis response teams, respite centers, and faith-based organizations. Preparing for a disaster. Develop a communication plan, okay? Just identifying, again, who is responsible for what, where should we go in the need of an emergency. Again, we want to be proactive, as proactive as we possibly can, because when we're reactive, we plan to fail, okay? Having that evacuation plan, so identifying specific areas to go to, drawing that evacuation location out so that we'll know where we need to evacuate to, having those supply kits, having all of those things, talking about it like this, like we're anticipating this to happen tomorrow, and having a sense of urgency and revisiting this, okay? So having these fire drills, right? Having those fire drills, but also saying, wow, learning from those fire drills to see if what we're implementing, is that actually working, right? Because we may have something set up, but there may be some glitches in there, and some of the plans that we have may not be working at all. It may not be effective, so we need to, take some things away and add some other things.